All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to episode 4 of the Triple Net Roundtable, where we break down real deals, real strategies, and real insights in the net lease space. Got a jam, action-packed episode for you guys today. So today's episode is really insightful conversation around capital markets, lending, and how commercial real estate deals actually get financed behind the scenes. So we'll be joined by Miguel Jauregui, who specializes in debt and equity placement across commercial real estate transactions. And we'll get into your DSCR type of loans, leverages within the triple net lease space, how to actually leverage, right? And then we'll get into cap rates, lender behavior, and how investors really should be thinking about financing commercial assets in today's market. So as always, thank you guys for the continued support and chiming in and listening in to our podcast recordings. And then make sure you please like and subscribe as well. Thank you. Take care. Welcome back, everyone, to the Triple Net Roundtable, where we break down real deals, real strategies, and real insights in the net lease space. Today, I'm joined by Miguel Jauregui, Managing Director of Capital Markets at Sands Investment Group, where he leads debt and equity strategies across commercial real estate transactions within the net lease space. Today, we're going to dive into how he approaches lending in today's environment, how investors should think about financing deals, and what's really happening behind the scenes when it comes to getting deals to the closing table. So, Miguel, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Let's jump in, man.
Great. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Appreciate
the intro.
Thank you. So, Miguel, you got, quite an interesting background being in this space for quite some time, man. Like, how did you get into the commercial real estate space, and specifically, like, how did you get into the lending side of real estate?
Way back, I was in residential because I always had an interest in real estate. That was like during college and so on. Then I went to grad school, went to specifically business school, and out of that I went into banking. Was at Wells Fargo for a few years, and in the commercial real estate, the balance sheet lending arm. So I really got a lot of insights into the institutional side of the business, right? Doing like big hotels and skyscrapers and large residential developments and big box retailers and so on. So it gave me a great insight into how the world of real estate works, from really more of an institutional picture. From there, I moved on to brokerage, actually investment sales, multifamily brokerage, because I was in New York at the time. And it was a very active space in the New York City area. I just wanted to basically work hard and make what I'm worth. So I wanted to be a broker. I was kind of sick of sitting behind a cubicle or sitting in a cubicle and just doing spreadsheets and opening, just basically sitting on my laptop or, my desktop, not really doing a lot of face-to-face, right? Mm-hmm. Sales. Basically just a lot of analysis. It served its purpose because it taught me a lot, but at the same time, I wanted to be in sales. I wanted to be customer facing. So I went into brokerage, multifamily, which was really call heavy, basically work super hard, shake a lot of hands and all that. After some time in that space in New York City, I decided that I also wanted to move back home to me, which is Los Angeles. Okay. And I needed a plan to do that. Being in New York City multifamily, I was ever going to be able to take a jump to New York City to Los Angeles. So move spaces into the net lease space because that is something that I can basically be anywhere and be able to work in it. Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to take a step back and going back into financing. It kind of started happening slowly just because I was working on one deal and they needed financing. So I just started helping them on the financing. And I thought, this is really cool. It's very exciting, to be back in that. And then before I knew it, that was 2019. And I found myself in a role that was going to be in net lease financing with a group that had just spun out of Marcus. So they had just spun out, started their own company, and they said, hey, you can do our financing and, we'll do what we can to help each other. And then from there, moved this to Sands, where I am today. I've been here for a few years and continue to be in the net lease financing space. It's a beautiful space to be in. I think it's that there's definitely a large need for someone with an expertise in the net lease space, while also understanding financing, of course, because a lot of the net lease financing, I think, happens with a lot of generalist mortgage brokers. And the net lease space, because of the various nuances in S&D, STOFLs, understanding credits, understanding, co-tenancy and various retail, dynamics, you really need a specialist. And, that's where I've found a lot of success in being able to specialize in it and so on. So that's where I am today.
Awesome. Thank you for that background there, Miguel. Quite a bit to unpack there, but that it's all great information because it gives us an idea of the things that you went through and different roles that you've taken within the real estate business to get to where you are today. And so being that I'm a sales guy myself, man, it's always interesting having a conversation with another sales minded person as well. When you went from being a broker back into being more so on the lending side, what were some of those skills or characteristics that you carried from your time as a broker, right, being very client facing, to where you are now, more so on the lending side?
Being a broker in New York City multifamily taught me how to make a lot of phone calls and hustle really hard.
Yeah.
And I think that is where I really stand apart from my competition in the net lease financing space. There's not a whole lot of competition specifically in the net lease space. I could probably name 5 or so, other teams / brokers who do what I do. But there's a lot of brokers in the space, call it at one of the big shops. They generalize a lot and will kind of touch anything they can finance. So what I took from my experience in investment sales was how to do a lot of calls, how to hit the phones really hard and how to hustle hard and how to follow up, and also how to talk to people and how to be, a salesperson in a way. I think that's where a lot of things are missed when somebody's transitioning from banking into brokerage. Sometimes they're too analytical and too black and white, versus when you're a broker, when you're a debt advisor, you really need to see the gray, because that is, that's where the money's made, is being able to find the needle in the haystack lender who's going to do like one deal that everyone else has said no to. So it's been a great experience. I think the combination of my experience being a banker as well as being in a space like that's really cold call heavy and really really puts you kind of in a bullpen. The combination of those two things have led to where I am today.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, it's like cold calling isn't dead, right? It doesn't necessarily matter what year it is or what time frame it is, man. The core concept of cold calling, it still works. It's how I've gotten a lot of my customers and a lot of my deals. And I'm sure that's how you've generated a lot of business as well. Just picking up the phone, and having a simple conversation there, man. I definitely love that and resonate that.
Connecting with people doesn't go away. I was having a conversation yesterday about, of course, AI and so on, because AI is taking over so many roles. And something I heard somebody say was like, some billionaire was like, well, AI is never going to replace any role where you need to have a trusted advisor. Like, AI can help that trusted advisor do a better job at what they do. Be it a wealth advisor or a broker or whatever. But you're going to need a human to decipher that and figure it out for you. Right. I've had clients who have come into the space, into net lease, because they've maybe sold a company for a lot of money and have a lot of financial capital to come invest into net lease. And they've done a great job of having AI teach them about net lease and how to invest. But yeah, I got to sit with them and teach them what the reality is between what AI told you and what real life is like. You know, and being a broker, whether I was in multifamily before, way back for a few years, or where I am today, like you can quickly tell when you get a call from somebody you haven't spoken to before, like who's real and who's not, who who gets it and who doesn't get it, you know, based on the questions they ask you. I remember when I was in multifamily, like you would get calls from like mom and pops. Let's say it's a doctor who wants to buy like an apartment building or something like that. But you knew if they had learned maybe off of some webinar how to do multifamily investing or something versus the people who actually knew how to do it, right? And you would give 2 cents of attention to that person that didn't really know. And it's the same thing today. I get calls from people who are like, I want to buy something retail or some net lease. And once you start having a conversation, you realize like this person knows what they're doing or doesn't. You can quickly tell based on real experience, not based on what AI is teaching you. I particularly have a client that I think about who has just gone through that. So had a huge exit on a company and is buying multifamily with all the money. He's done a great job of learning the net lease space through cloud specifically. But he also listens to me when I tell him what like real life is like and what AI has told him. So he's able to like mix the two, you know, but AI cloud has helped him like basically learn what it could have taken somebody 2 years to learn quickly. His idea, what he tells me is that I will eventually get replaced by AI. But you know, he's a big AI. But I don't think like you having a conversation with me right now proves that AI can't replace me. Right. It can help me. Like it's helped my AI has helped my business a lot to where I am today versus 2 years ago in my process and my outreach and all that. It's helped it a lot. There's no, you know, it still takes somebody to like read data, right? And comprehend it and have a conversation. You know, and be like, pick up the phone and talk to a banker. A banker's not going to be talking about computers to you. 100%. Got a lot to say on that. I could go on and on about that. Go ahead.
Can you keep going, man? So like, and that's interesting because, you know, so do you like what room or what role do you see AI playing like on the lending side? Is it more so like on the underwriting side or is it just like not a role at all? Like what's your take on that?
A lot of analysis for sure. Okay. It's really helped with analyzing deals and putting things together. Like now, this year, my team implemented some AI tool that was created, not like a cloud or ChatGPT, but you know, some commercial real estate AI tool that we bought. Yeah. To help us put our decks together to deliver a better presentation to lenders. And it's like I'm astonished by how far it took us so fast. It needs a lot of work and there's a lot of kinks because that AI doesn't get. I mean, if you run something on ChatGPT or cloud or something, and if they do a real deep analysis, you're going to find some kinks. I'm sure when you're doing your analysis on the deal, you're like, they totally missed this number because like ChatGPT doesn't know how to do math sometimes, but they can do some crazy stuff, right? Yep. So it's helped me a lot to develop like my deliverables. And it's also helped me multiply by 3 or 4x how much my outreach is. I used to do a deal, let's call it like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. Yeah, let's say 2 years ago, I used to go out on any deal, you know, say it's a gas station in Houston or whatever. I'd go out on a deal, I would hit like 60, 70 lenders, right? Like in one shot, something like that. Today, I'd go out on a deal at a gas station in Texas, in Dallas, let's say, or Houston. I'll hit 200 in one shot. And a lot of that is because we discovered AI tools, you know, that are, again, something you can buy online and you can find that will scavenge the internet for all of that data. I'll say, hey, I want anybody with a title that is commercial lender in Texas or something, or Houston or something like that. And it'll give me so much data. Some of it is wrong, of course, but a lot of it is right. So I'm able to uncover what used to take so long to do. I used to have like an analyst calling branches, because they, in Houston, to try to like find the right person to speak to, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, in my business, and in the call it $20 million bucket of deals, you're not calling a branch to find the right person. You've got to find a commercial lender who's sitting in some office somewhere, and you can't just 1-800 them. So getting that data took much longer. Now it scavenges the internet, finds information. I don't know, it uses LinkedIn, it does whatever it does, and it gets some data quickly and would go very wide. In 2 hours, I could be out to 200 lenders, let's say, right? And it's really important to do that, because in a business like I am, I'm really, really serving an intermediary service for like a client, right? A client who obviously has money and they're buying a $5 million asset. They have maybe one analyst or two people that support them in the office, and they have, let's say, 20 properties or something, like a regular private client. They don't have the bandwidth to hit 200 lenders. They may call 5 or 10 lenders because they know some people, and they may look on Google and say, hey, call these banks that are here and within a certain circumference, but they're going to be calling the branches, right? They're not going to be calling the people they should be. It serves a huge purpose that really differentiates me, where the client decides to say, oh, yeah, well, I don't want to pay you because you cost me 1% of the loan amount. I should just save this money. You can save the money, of course you can, but like, you're not going to hit the people I'm going to hit. But, if I'm too expensive for you, then so be it. But the reality is most people don't. I'm not too expensive for them, because they'll try their process and say, nobody wants to finance me. And then they'll call the broker and they'll say, hey, broker, your deal's too expensive. Nobody wants to finance me. And then the broker calls me and says, talk to Miguel. And then 3 days later, I got confirmed. And everyone's like, it's financeable, but, so it's made our process internally for analyzing deals. I mean, and at least there's not a whole lot of analysis, but definitely our deliverables. And it's made our outreach process, which is really where our goal, like our goal that separates us, separates us is, it's made it huge, because I can't think of, somebody else that would be able to do that. And I don't know everything my competitors do, but arguably I would say, I know them pretty well. I mean, we get drinks and stuff when we go to ICSC, so maybe I'll ask them when I'm there. But I'll say, how many lenders do you got to on a regular deal? And I will put my numbers up against anybody and say, well, that's what we do, in this space. And that's, it's in the transactional $2 to $20 million space. We're not doing $80 million Amazon warehouses. I mean, I'd love to do it, but that's a different ballgame. Obviously, that takes that's an institutional approach. We're not. That's not the space we play in. We're in a much more transactional space.
Mm-hmm. No, that's perfect, man. And that's the. I would say that's one of the benefits of AI in general, is that it allows you to duplicate yourself, but then also your team members as well, right? And so, like, if you were to have like a human try to reach out to 200 lenders, like, how much time would you think that actually take them? It'd take them, an eternity, man. And then you got bathroom breaks, coffee breaks, showing up to the office late, like all types of stuff, right? But then with these AI agents or AI softwares, like they don't sleep. You can run them autonomously, night and day sort of thing.
I used to have like an analyst I would tell him, hey, your job today is to find these 15 lenders, right? I'd give him a list of lenders, and he calls and he goes on LinkedIn, sends some messages, maybe takes some guesses at their emails, first name dot last name at whatever their domain is .com. And he could find maybe 10 to 15 a day. Now, today I had my analyst run for a deal we're doing in Texas and in Dallas and in Houston. And he came back to me and he's like, all right, he pulled 70 in Dallas and he pulled 120 in Houston, so 190 lenders that he pulled that, in 4 hours, versus before it would have been 15 in, it could have been like a day, or whatever. Which is crazy. It's wild how much it helps us, but I'm sure my competition is doing the same thing. So, but it's just you always got to level up. If I was doing what I was doing 2 years ago, I wouldn't be where I am today.
100%, man. 100%. You had mentioned a couple things earlier I want to touch on, as far as, folks that are, getting into the space or maybe looking at making their first, triple net acquisition. Like, what are some of the the common mistakes you consistently see like investors make when it comes to, the purchase of a triple net property?
I think that the first thing that I tell anybody who is going to start investing into it is understand what your DSCR is, your debt service coverage ratio. I think somebody will want to buy a 7-Eleven because they just sold, let's say, a multifamily property for $10 million in New Jersey. They want to buy a 7-Eleven and they think, okay, well, in multifamily, you get 75-80% leverage normal, right? It's average in residential. First mistake they make, because we see this a lot, is they think that's normal for commercial real estate, as in, retail. It's not. 65% is kind of standard. I mean, 75-80 can happen, but it also doesn't pencil out. So I say you got to run a DSCR, because they'll say, how is it that they don't want to lend 75% on a 7-Eleven? It's a grade A credit. It's amazing real estate. And I'm like, if I got you a loan at 75% and I told you that you'd actually have to pay out of pocket to service the loan every month, so your investment would actually lose money, would you do it? They'll say no. And they say, well, that's gonna happen. So the first thing I try to explain to people is, forget about the LTV. The LTV's out the window, right? It's just DSCR is what we really have to focus on, right? And sometimes the LTV matters too, because you have a high cap rate deal. But in this environment where your typical interest rate today is 6 to 6.5, right? 6.75 maybe on something not so good, where cap rates are mostly like 6.5 to like 7.5. Sometimes obviously a 6 or a 5.5, or sometimes an 8. It's tough to like pencil out a 75% leverage deal. So just understanding the DSCR, it's similar to like when you go shopping for a house. You go shopping for a house, you don't look at the LTV. You go to a lender and you're like, hey, I want to buy a house. They'll say, okay, well, give me all your income. You give them your income, your tax returns, whatever, your W-2s. And then they tell you, hey, this is how much house you can afford, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the thing you can afford. And you translate that into, rate, into loan amount. This is how much loan you can afford. You could afford $40 million in loan based on your income, and then go shop for a $2 million home if you want. You just have to put $1 million down, right? It's the same thing when you're looking at transactions like this. Like, give me your NOI, your net operating income on this property you want to buy, this car wash, and then I'll tell you how much loan you can get. And then you can back into it and you can negotiate a better price to get a better leverage. You can do what you want. But they think, a lot of people think that are new to the space that they can just get a certain leverage and that it'll work. And I mean, honestly, even seasoned people think that sometimes, because they just don't go and look at the back of, do the quick back of the napkin. But I mean, that's what we're here for, is to like tell them this sizes, this doesn't size, and so on. I would tell them that's super important to understand, and also the quality of the credit, right? When somebody is buying in the net lease space, you're essentially like buying like, a bond in the company, right? Because you think whether it's Walgreens, which is private now, not so great, or it's 7-Eleven, you're buying a bond in the company. If you're buying a 7-Eleven, you're going to buy like a 5.5 cap, a 5 cap maybe. It's a low return, but it's very high certainty of, of payment. You're going to get paid. It's a 7-Eleven, it's a Wawa. Well, you're going to Walgreens, you get essentially a bond, which is your cap rate at an 8 cap. Let's say 7.5, 8.5 cap. You're going to get a higher return on it, similar to how the stock market provides, your risk return analysis and anything else. But you also have a higher certainty of something happening in the next 5 years. They may not pay you rent. They may decide to negotiate your rent and decrease your the lease or something. They may try to renegotiate you. So it's the same thing. So when you're buying that lease, understand you're basically buying a bond in the company. And you've got to understand the financials. You have to, just something like similar to how you're buying, into any company. You have to understand the ins and outs of what they're doing, why that real estate would succeed there. Understand what the re-tenanting potential is. If it's a gas station in the middle of nowhere or a gas station in downtown, like what's going to happen if that tenant leaves? You got to understand the ins and outs of that. So it's not just purely you're buying a credit. It's not just a 7-Eleven, because it's still a piece of real estate. So what makes it good real estate, and then what makes it a good credit? You gotta weigh the two things to realize, what is a good deal and what isn't. And, I think that's like what I would right away tell somebody is, understand that, because they'll see I do a lot of gas and car washes, but gas stations is an example where like they'll see a gas station and say, oh, look, it says Shell. okay, yes, it says shell, and they think like, oh, it's a nice corner, it's in Philly, it's great, like great real estate. I
Yeah.
like the shell. And I'm like, well, yeah, but that shell is just a name. It means nothing. You know, who's the operator? How many units do they have, you know, under their management, and how well do they do? Because the shell means nothing on the front, right? Sometimes randomly, you know, rarely, you may get like a shell, which is a real shell, you know, with the real credit of shell, but that rarely happens. So, you know, they have to understand what they're buying. And again, in the real estate, and if they want to look at the price per square foot, look at the price per square foot. Usually the price per square foot in anything net lease is crazy. You know, it's high. But that's the beauty of net lease. That's also why I have clients that have made a lot of money from their home office in the net lease space, because they also understand the value of putting a lease in. You know, you could buy something for $200 per square foot and sell it for $1,000 per square foot. You would never be able to really do that in residential. You couldn't create that kind of arbitrage, but in the net lease space, you can. You can create, you know, I've seen that where you can 5X an investment, you know, in 2 years, without having to deal with a lot of tenants and toilets either. You can just do it from your desk, but obviously it's easier said than done. But it's, that's the beauty of the space.
No, that's awesome. That's great, man. And one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking there, Miguel, is, you know, not only like the credit worthiness of a tenant as well, but then you started mentioning as well as far as like location, right? You know, location always plays a huge factor. You know, and there's a gentleman out there by the name of Joel, and he talks with the concept as dirt first, right? Look at the location first, you know, and then from there, you know, you get your daily traffic, average median income for the area, that sort of stuff. And the rest will follow suit as you're doing that. So one question I had for you is as well, right? So when we're talking about like these triple net leases and within this space, you know, obviously the lease is important, the lease agreement itself. When you guys are going through, you know, different evaluations or looking at certain deals, right? How much of a factor does a asset with maybe like a expiring lease in the next year, you know, factor in, you know, from an underwriting perspective versus something that may have, you know, a lease in place for like 10, 15, 20 years, for example?
I mean, it used to be that a short lease was like detrimental to the deal. Not always. I think it really helps. I have clients who make a killing on buying just 1 or 2 year leases because they can get a crazy cap rate for a transaction, right? Because the thing with net leases, you obviously lose value every year once you hit 10 years, and then your years start going down. From 20 to 11 or 12, you lose almost no value. It's kind of worth the same. Then 12 down to like 6, it starts losing value. And then 6 to 3, it really starts losing value, right? It's pretty detrimental, but not as much as the credit is or the financials that sit behind it. I'm financing something now that has, and I closed something 2 months ago that had 2 months left on the lease, right? And it was with it was a county office for something in Alabama where they did like all the human resources for the county. And we were able to build a story around like that they're going to stay there and so on, right? Because that tenant, they had already been housed there for the last 50 years. So they were like, all right, it's a very high possibility that they're going to stay there. So we were still able to get like a 6% interest rate, 5 years fixed, 75% leverage loan. It was really good loan for a transaction like that. Plus, we're able to also back end the story by saying that this was actually on a corridor where like this area in Alabama had all developed around it. The county had their office there for the last 50 years, but now there was like a Chick-fil-A across the street, you know, and there was all this retail all the way around. You were able to build a story around it that really almost made like that 3 month or at 6 month lease when we started, and then it was like 3 months left by the time we closed. Like the lender didn't even think about it. They were like, yeah, it has a short lease, but they're going to be there. It's fine. Right. So you've got a short lease. There's ways around it. And I think it provides a great opportunity for you as a buyer though, to negotiate a great deal. because my client negotiated like a 9.5 cap on this deal, right? And could the tenant leave? They could. They didn't end up leaving. They already re-signed the lease. So they ended up actually getting a big rent bump by renegotiating the lease to a higher rent because they knew the county wasn't going to move. Mm-hmm. So now their cash on cash is insane. And they got a great loan with it. Now they're just going to keep it. But if they did leave, my tenant was like, I'm across the street from a Chick-fil-A. I'm not my tenant, my client. Yeah. I'm across the street from a Chick-fil-A. I'm going to be good anyways. There's a Chick-fil-A here. There's a 7-Eleven over there. I'm like, I'll be able to put Starbucks in here if I want to. And if he did put Starbucks in there, he'd probably make even more of a killing because he would have taken that price per square footage and multiplied it maybe times 2 or 3 or 4. But with that said, there's a lot of opportunity in short leases. Another client something I'm doing right now, he's texting me about that. I'm hopefully closing on Friday, where the client is acquiring a preschool that has a year left on it or something along those lines. In that case, he's also getting an amazing deal, and the transaction he's getting great financing, and it's also because we built a whole story around it. So to the seller, it's detrimental to have a few years left on the lease. Yeah. To the buyer, it's a huge opportunity. That's of course if you have a high certainty in that they're going to stay. My client did a lot of analysis on both ends. They did a lot of research that they were able to like pick up an opportunity. Let's kind of continue where I was. So it creates a lot of value for the potential buyer to acquire something because you can have a huge arbitrage. You're taking a risk because at the same time you are acquiring something that you can have, and there's a potential for the tenant to leave. But if your basis is there and you can cover your basis and you know what you could potentially, get on the open market for it, then great. Or if you've done enough research and you know the tenant's not going to move because their sales numbers are great. Maybe their placer, if they have some placer data around it, you can like tell what the foot traffic is like, and you can tell if there's a lot of opportunity there. You can sit there and, go to the place, park outside for 2 days, see what the traffic is like, see if people are happy, look at their Yelp, look at their Google page, see if they have great ratings, if they have a lot of support from the community. Do all your research to find out and be like, you know what, this guy's not leaving. Like, I'm going to buy this at a great cap rate, keep it, and they're not going to leave. I'm going to roll the dice with that. And then the moment that extend the lease, like my client who's buying this preschool at a 13 cap, he's very confident they're going to extend the lease. The moment they extend the lease, he's buying it for $9 million at a 13 cap. They have a year left on the lease. Once they extend the lease by 5 or 10 years, his 13 cap is going to go to like an 8 cap, and his $9 million is going to turn into $60 million.
Yeah.
And he's doing this from his home office in Miami. So there's, a lot of opportunity to be made. And I mean, that's one of the beauties in that lease too.
That's fire, man. So, okay. So this may be a novice question here. So the actual like renewal of the lease, it's more beneficial, it seems like, to do it post-close versus pre-close because then at that point...
You're asking the seller.
Yeah.
They should do it pre-close.
Pre-close, yeah.
You're asking the buyer, they should do it post-close. The person's going to take that arbitrage.
Okay. Oh, wow.
I mean, there's times that we'll do a deal where my client, let's say they'll have relationships with certain tenants. Like they know people in Starbucks on the inside, right? Like they know somebody in the Starbucks real estate department or Meineke or whatever tenant. Yeah. They know somebody on the inside that they've gone to know. So they will go and find a Starbucks with like 1 year's on it left or something like that, right? At a high cap rate. And they'll call their inside person and say, hey, can you tell me about this deal? Are you guys going to renew it or not? And they'll say, maybe, or yes, or we're not, right? If they say, no, we're not, they'll just go ahead and let it go. If they say, yeah, we would renew it for the right deal, they'll put it under contract and then have a conversation with Starbucks, put a whole new lease in place. And they will, Starbucks is one example, put a new lease in place. I will finance it with the new lease in place. The seller doesn't even know this is happening behind the curtain. He thinks he or she think they're selling the deal at they're getting a good deal because they're selling a 1-year Starbucks. Whereas we negotiated a new lease that is going to be signed on the same day that the purchase agreement that we close. So we close, the new lease is signed on the same day. So the lender is going to underwrite to the new lease. And let's say they buy it for $2 million. The new lease goes into place right away. It's worth 2.8. So, I'm just making up some numbers, but I've seen it happen. And overnight they just closed, bought this for 2, put the new lease in place. It's worth 2.8 now, and they'll turn around and flip it, and the seller's like, oh my gosh, how do they do this to me? And I'm like, well, that's what happened, right? It's like you were sleeping on it. Like you should have done this, or you just didn't have the connections to do it. It's like it's like people that wholesale houses. Same thing. It's like you catch somebody sleeping, and then you create a lot of opportunity overnight. And it's what it is. It's part of the game that's played in the net lease space, which is also why I love it.
Yeah, I love that, man. And that's actually. That's fire, and it's fire in so many ways, or it's cool in so many ways because like a lot of times in the net lease space, people say it's like you're saying, it's the bond of real estate, right? It's very cookie cutter. You get your 5 cap, 6 cap, 5.5 cap, 4.5 cap, whatever the case may be. But there are other opportunities based on what you're saying, kind of dependent upon the asset itself, and then the credit backed organization or the credit rating of the end user there, or the customer rather. But there's ways to force appreciation at the end of the day here, and forcing that appreciation is more so just, to your point, having the creativeness, but then also having the network as well, to be able to, identify those particular assets that may have 1 year left on the lease, 6 months left on the lease. Okay, let's go to the corporate office and find out, who we can contact from there, and then say, hey, would you, potentially consider renewing this lease, kind of thing, right? And that's amazing, man. It's amazing that you do this.
People generalize that you can't create like value like that in that lease, because they're like, what do you mean? I'm just buying a rent and I'm going to get increases. Yeah, I mean, it's like buying an apartment building and just collecting rent. But it's the concept of creating forced appreciation in the residential space is easy for anybody to understand, because they're like, I'm going to renovate it and increase rents. Well, it's not that easy. You're not renovating anything in that lease, but there's definitely forced appreciation plays, and the forced appreciation doesn't require you to invest anything into the property, really. Yes, you may have to pay a leasing commission because you need to pay somebody a CBRE for negotiating the lease with Starbucks with you, for you. But you don't have to renovate the building to force appreciation. You just gotta have the right connection, and you do it from your desk, and then just created, appreciation overnight. So it's but it requires the connections, and that's why these networking events like ICSC, in Vegas in a month and a half, why they're so big, and important, because that's where all the tenants are, right? And you need the tenants to find out who's on the inside so that you can create plays, right? Or I have clients who buy land, right? They buy land in the middle of nowhere, not in the middle of nowhere, but let's say it's on the outskirts of, an hour outside of Dallas or something. And, well, they just got ground that they got for cheap. Who knows what they pay per acre, but they put a Chick-fil-A on there, or Dutch Bros or something. They could flip that one. They could turn a lot of value out of that piece of land when they get that lease signed.
Absolutely, 100%, man. Before we close here, Miguel, just a couple more things I got for you, man. I was listening to one of your other podcasts with Jeremy there, and you had mentioned a phrase that I personally never heard before, and it was lender-friendly states, right? So, being on the residential side, I've heard of course, tenant-friendly states, landlord-friendly states, but I never heard the concept of lender-friendly states. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that and what exactly that means?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's also something I would have said earlier if I remember. Regarding the things that people should know, right? They think if I'm buying Starbucks, it doesn't matter where it is because it's still a Starbucks. It does matter where it is. One, because of what I mentioned about understanding the real estate dynamics. But what also matters is that when you're able to lay out the whole country and say, well, like, where should I buy something or where should I finance? If I was the bank, I would be like, hey, where do I want to finance? Do I want to finance in Texas or Louisiana? Right? It's not. They're not all created equal for the same reason that there's tenant friendly states and landlord friendly states because of various political dynamics. It's the same thing for lender friendly states because there's certain states where foreclosing on a property is very easy. And there's states where it's not easy, right? So if it's easy to foreclose on a property in a state because of their own judicial process, it makes it a much friendlier state for lenders to want to jump into versus lender states they don't want to. Also, aside from that, it's also like the environmental aspects to it. There's states that have like tenant funded, environmental funds. So it makes it much better for like a gas station or a car wash or really anything, because if there's ever a brownfield situation, you've got dirty land. Well, you've got dirty land, and I know that I got the state to fund, to back fund it through some state funded, environmental plan. I know that I'm covered on my downside, right? There's states that have those funds and states that don't. There's states that have a lot of environmental issues and lenders want to stay away from them. Louisiana, right? Floods and water, and there's a lot of issues there, right? Underneath. Right. Well, and then obviously insurance, which is another one, right? Where it's easier to get insurance or not, or it's expensive like Florida or whatever. So those different dynamics start impacting, what is a good place to finance in and not. So Louisiana, not great, right? It's probably one of the worst states to finance in. Lenders won't jump into there. I'll have somebody in Texas, somebody in Alabama, somebody in Florida, and even bordering it or Mississippi or something. They won't jump over the border to lend in Louisiana. So you got to find a lender in Louisiana to lend in Louisiana. But if I'm in Florida, I get a lot of lenders, so not a lot. Now that insurance has gone up so much, not as much. And Florida's not as hot as it used to be of a market. But Texas, in Texas, you'll get Alabama lenders and Arkansas lenders, and these lenders will jump the border to lend there. Same goes for the Alabama or Arkansas. They're easier states to finance in because they're bordering Texas, right? A state like West Virginia, not great because it's such a small state. Like it's very small state, so you get almost no lenders there. Whereas New Jersey is amazing, right? Philly is good and bad. It depends if you're on the west or east side of Pennsylvania. But I mean Pennsylvania, not just Philly. But it really is able to it's able to gain a lot of traction as an area to finance in because you're between the DMV area, right? Where DC, you've got a lot of lenders, the big city, and New York, obviously a lot of lenders. So you kind of stuck between two big metros that will provide a lot of opportunity there, to get like a lender to come in. Whereas and sometimes in the middle part of the country, you may not get that. So it's an important thing to consider when you're shopping. And that's why I tell clients, be in touch with a, debt advisor to be able to discuss it and see, what the dynamics look like. Don't just think that it's all created equal at just a Starbucks.
Yeah, absolutely. So, man, Louisiana, they're not getting any love right now. It sounds like. Is that primarily due to the foreclosure requirements?
Yeah, their process is tough, and the environmental issues too. And floods and all that. There's a lot of little things that happen.
Yeah, I see Texas is a hot spot right now, and then another.
Texas definitely is.
Yeah, 100%. Arizona seems to be a hot spot, like Scottsdale, Phoenix area.
Yeah, I would say so too. It gets pretty good financing. Probably not the best. I mean, not like Southern California may or Dallas or Houston. All of California gets amazing financing. Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina is like sleeper states because people don't understand how the financing there is amazing. And you can still get a lot of opportunity, right? You pay something in California is always going to have a really bad, by really bad, I mean really low cap rate. Yeah. But in South Carolina, let's say in Greensville or something like that, or Greensboro, North Carolina, you're going to get if you can still get a really good cap rate and get really good financing. Athens, Georgia, or something like that too. So it's important to like be in touch with a debt advisor, and I tell clients all the time. I'm like, you don't have to hire me, right? I'm not the only one that does what I do. Obviously, if you feel free to hire my competition if you must, but all I would tell you is like hire somebody. Like, don't think you can do this on your own. AI is not going to tell you what states are better or not. Maybe you can run a deep analysis to understand the judicial foreclosure process in the whole country and decipher your own conclusions out of it. But that's also going to take, that would be its own job, trying to figure that out. So just talk to a debt advisor, like have somebody really, don't think you can do this on your own. There's a lot of value that comes out of it. Plus you create a bidding environment. Just similar to like somebody when they're going to sell a property or they're going to you want to sell something, sell a car. You want to sell a car. You're not just going to put it in your driveway and put a sign on it. You're going to want to put it on, I don't know, wherever you sell cars, eBay or Facebook Marketplace or whatever. You got to create a market for it. You want to sell a property, you're going to hire a broker to get it on the MLS if it's a house or something like that to create a market for it. It's the same thing for financing. You want to create a market for it, so that people can bid it, because then you win when people compete, right? And if you want to just call 5 lenders and they know you're not working with any debt advisor, they're going to know their competition is limited. That's why there's lenders who literally, there's few, but there's definitely lenders we run into who say we don't work with brokers. And they don't work with brokers because they're like, I know when a broker's involved, like I'm going to have to really compete and, drop my rate, increase my AM, increase my leverage, whatever the number is. Because then they have to compete. And they just would rather not work with brokers, because if they work directly with one-on-one with the person, with the investor, they could probably get them, for a better ride.
Yeah. Getting margin that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. No, and so I've being that we just went through our first, my business partner and I just finished up our first fix and flip, and so we went with a broker as well. And so originally we were going with someone that they were lending directly off the balance sheet, private money lender, right? But we found that with the broker they had access to a broader network. And so that's honestly, I would say that's one of the main core benefits that we, in our experience, more so on the residential side, had come across theirs with those, brokers that had, access to better loan offerings or loan programs, and then they knew other, lenders that could get the deal done, right?
Of course.
And I'm sure it's the same way on from your side of the house there. But hey, Miguel, last question for you, man. That I like to ask all my guests here as we're coming up on time. What's one trend, in the capital market space that you're watching over the next, 6 to 12 months? One trend that you're keeping a close eye on?
Higher rates, I hate to be, cliche and say it's rates, but they're so all over the place right now, right? Like I talk to clients who are like, they'll say, hey, where are rates going to go up or down? I'm like, it's 50-50. It just depends what you think is going to happen. Like today, the question is like, what do you think is going to happen with Iran? They have their opinion. They're like, oh, this going to be done in 2 weeks. Well, if it's going to be done in 2 weeks, then you shouldn't lock anything today. You should lock later, right? They say, this is going to be another problem. This is going to be a problem we're going to have for years. And you should lock now because it's only going to the rates are only going to go up. And then they have opinions about, well, what do you think is going to happen with the new Jerome Powell Fed appointee, right? His name's escaping me right now, but he's coming in May, right? Jerome Powell's coming to an end. Well, again, this guy's pro low interest rates and so on, given that, he's being driven by the Trump administration, and obviously the Trump administration loves low interest rates. Well, is he really going to be able to do a lot? Who knows, right? That was the big conversation before Iran happened. And then, AI is also taking its own, its own conversation on what's going to happen, because productivity is in a different place today than it was, right? That's a whole other conversation with AI, which we kind of touched on. And also the private credit crisis right now, right? We're going through a private credit crunch that is kind of driving all over the news. And what's going to happen there when it comes to the private side, which is like the bridge lending side. right? And what kind of availability of capital is there? Are they scared? Are they not? And so on. So there's a lot of dynamics. I mean, I think the big one right now is Iran, because something happens on a daily basis and it hits the news, the airwaves. Well, at that point, we see it come. We see something happen with the U.S. Treasury. So I'm just consistently keeping a tap on like the 5-year U.S. Treasury, since that is the biggest barometer of like measuring interest rates for us, because almost everything we do is 5 years fixed. So it's typically something off of the 5-year U.S. Treasury. So yeah, I would say just keeping a tab on all of it. It felt like everything was just going very smooth. From like November until like February, it was just so smooth. It was stable. We were in a good place. And then volatility started again. But this is, if you think there's not going to be any volatility, you're going to be sorely mistaken. Right. It's part of the game. Absolutely. It keeps going too.
Absolutely. I love that, man. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, we definitely have to see how this Iran scenario plays out. That would definitely be interesting to see. I do quite a bit of investing on the stock side, so I always have Bloomberg up on the TV here as I'm working.
Yeah.
Paying attention to like different fixed indexes and things of that nature. Man, there's a lot of validity, right now.
The VIX index is important to keep tab on.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Miguel, this has been great, man. Really appreciate you breaking down what's happening on your side of the house with these triple net, deals. And so for anyone listening out there were a lot of valuable insights on how these deals actually get done in today's market. And so, Miguel, if anyone wants to connect with you, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you, to contact you?
Yeah, I mean, you can Google my name, Miguel Jauregui, and Sands. You'll probably just Google Miguel Jauregui and you'll find it, since there's not a lot of us out there in the real estate space, especially with this thing. You can find me on LinkedIn under Miguel Jauregui. I'm at Sands Investment Group. My email is pretty quick too. It's miguel@sandsigg.com for Sands Investment Group. Reach out to me anytime. Happy to get on a call and discuss.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Miguel. And thanks to everyone tuning in. Appreciate you for joining us on another episode of the Triple Net Roundtable. We'll catch you guys on the next one.